road, but now we're going to see Amsterdam from the water. That's a little bit different. You will notice that it is different. And I always say Amsterdam is best seen from the water because we have many waterways in town. And we have one natural waterway, after which Amsterdam was named, the river Amstel. In 1275, people they tamed the marshlands along this river and the river Amstel, and they called their settlement Amstelredamme, the dam across the river Amstel. And then the canals, all the other waterways are artificial waterways. We have 160 separate canals in town. And total length of all the canals combined is 100 kilometers and 62 miles. So we're going to see all that on our canal cruise. And so we're going to leave the harbour and we're going to make our way into the old town. And basically the harbour is now split in two because here we're going underneath the railway track. Well, first underneath the road and then the railway track, which means that the railway station is also very close. It's actually very close to your ship that way. And the railway station was built on an artificial island. So they created an artificial island in the harbour, and therefore now we have the part of the harbour where you are docked, but we're entering very soon part of the harbour that was part of the harbour at one time, but not really anymore today, at least not for the larger ships. There's a huge building here in front of us. We're going to go around this building. This is a fairly new building. It's from 1997. And it's a museum of science and technology. And this museum is mainly for children, I would say. Yeah? And what do you think this building looks like? Looks a little bit like a ship, huh? Maybe also a little bit like a sinking ship?
Yes.
Because we nickname all buildings and bridges in Amsterdam, and this building is called the Titanic locally. So it was actually built in the same year that the Titanic movie was released, so therefore called Titanic.
Wow.
It was designed by a very famous architect, Renzo Piano. He was an Italian architect, and he has actually designed a lot of different buildings all over the world, and also this Museum of Science and Technology. Now, one of my favorite sites in Amsterdam is coming up very soon. We're going to sail past a building, you can already see it ahead of us, and that white building that used to be the base for the Dutch Navy in the 17th century. Now, in the 17th century, we were the greatest seafaring nation in the world. We had two trading companies, the Dutch East and West India companies. They sailed to the East and the West Indies, and they brought back to Amsterdam spices and other exotic goods, which made Amsterdam a very rich and a very important city. So the 17th century in our history is also known as the Golden Age of Amsterdam. It's a time of great economic prosperity and cultural importance. And this is where the Navy's base used to be. In front you see an old trading ship or sailing ship, and that was the largest ship in the fleet of the Dutch East India Company. This is a copy of the original ship. That's the kind of ship we used to sail to the East and the West Indies with 400 years ago. Wow. And we're going to be close to that ship so that you can see it up close. Very interesting ship. And in the building now is the Maritime Museum of Amsterdam. And if you buy a ticket for that museum, you can also go and board the ship and see what life was like on board the ships in the 17th century. It was not cozy, I can tell you, because if you had to sail to the East Indies from here, and today's Indonesia, it took 8 months to get there, 8 months to get back. Half the sailors would not survive the journey because the food they took on board was not fresh food. And so a lot of sailors, they ended up with the disease scurvy. There was storms on the ocean, a lot of ships went down. There was tropical diseases once they got there. It was a very hard life. Now a ship like this needed about 150 men to operate it.
Yeah.
But they took double that amount, 300, because by the time they got back to Amsterdam, they would have lost half the crew. So can you imagine sailing with that to the East Indies? So the rear of the ship is very beautiful. It's very beautifully decorated. You will have to look back in a minute. But at the rear of the ship, you see two figures. One of them is Mercury. He's closest to us, and Mercury means the god of trade. On the other side is Neptune, that means the god of the sea, meaning that this is a trading ship sailing the world's oceans. I saw here at the back of the ship, this used to be the quarter for the high officers. I saw on the board sailors, they had to sleep down below. Very close together. But the building is also interesting, so that used to be the base of the Navy. The building is from 1656. Also, the journeys to the East and West Indies, they were dangerous because we had a lot of competition on the world's oceans. For instance, from the Spanish, the Portuguese, they had started to sail the world's oceans long before us. And also the British, they actually took over from us in the 18th century as the greatest seafaring nation in the world. So here we're entering the Canal Circle. So I don't know, did you already have a look at the map of Amsterdam? And you saw maybe that it's like in the shape of half a circle at the city, or I always say half a bicycle wheel, with the canals functioning as spokes.
Oh wow.
So what happened was is that Amsterdam was founded in 1275, and by some fishermen, they tried agriculture, but were in a swamp here, so agriculture was very difficult. So they became traders. First they traded with the North and the Baltic Seas in medieval times, and then in the 17th century with the East and the West Indies. And in those days Amsterdam was very small, and it started to attract a lot of people. A lot of immigrants came here, lots of labor immigrants who came to work for the Dutch East and West India companies, but also a lot of religious refugees, because it was the time of the Reformation, and a lot of people in Europe became Protestant, and the Catholic rulers, they didn't
there's
like
one of
this,
those
they
muddy
kicked those
bikes.
people out of their country. And lots of them came to Amsterdam. Also lots of Jewish people, they were persecuted everywhere, also came to Amsterdam. Now, why did all those religious refugees come here? Because we promised freedom of religion. And so between 1570 and 1620, the population actually tripled. It went from 30,000 to 100,000 in only 50 years. And they had to make the city larger, and they did so by digging 3 parallel canals in half a circle around the old medieval town center. And so that's what you see on the map if you look at the map of Amsterdam. And we've just entered one of those 3 canals. And this is the innermost of the 3 canals. And so we have another one running parallel next door, and then another one that's the furthest away. So by digging these 3 new canals, they actually quadrupled the city's area. And along those canals, they built 6,500 new houses and warehouses.
Booze cruise.
Now we are actually here in the newer part of the Canal Circle, because they actually started digging on the other side in 1613. And then they finished on the river Amstel in the year 1700, and then they completed this part a little bit later. So this is the newer part of the Amsterdam Canal. And those of you who did a walking tour this afternoon, and you walked on the older part, you're going to see that later as well. And this is a newer part. And this part is also the part that became the Jewish quarter of Amsterdam. And so, like I said, Amsterdam attracted a lot of religious refugees, amongst them also a lot of Jewish people. And they settled over here on 6 islands. The first Jewish people came here in the 16th century, and that went all the way up to the 19th century. First they came from Portugal and Spain, later they also came from Central Europe and Russia. And they settled on these 6 islands, and before World War II, the population of Amsterdam was about 700,000, and today that's about 850,000, but back then 700,000, and of those 700,000 people, 90,000 were Jewish. Before the war. That's nearly 1 in 7. Of those Jewish people, because of the Nazis, they started to deport all the Jewish people from 1942 onwards. Only 5,500 Jews in Amsterdam survived the war. And barely 1 in 16. It's one of the largest proportion of Jews murdered anywhere in Western Europe. Would you like to go for opening it? Because it stopped raining. I don't know if you want to have a little bit of a breeze.
Sure.
You think, yeah? Okay.
Look at you hunting.
See, we will probably be able to spot a little bit of Jewish heritage in this area here. We'll probably be able to catch a glimpse of the Holocaust Memorial and also of the Portuguese synagogue. And the Portuguese synagogue was built by the first Jews who came here from Portugal and Spain in the 16th century. The synagogue was built in 1675. That will be coming up on the right. And the Holocaust Memorial a little bit further down on the left. But first of all, here, look, this on the left is a huge greenhouse. And this is the Botanical Gardens of Amsterdam. And they also started in the 17th century as a repository for tropical seeds and plants brought back by the Dutch East India companies. And the gardens were used by the city's doctors. Of course, they made their medicines from the plants here. And this greenhouse here has a lot of plants from different countries. And it belongs to the Botanical Gardens. So if you look here, we can see a bit of it here to the right-hand side. You see a building with huge round windows, and there on the right-hand side, you can see it through the trees, and that's the Portuguese synagogue. And so built in 1675. And opposite, on the other side, is the Jewish Museum, which is housed in the synagogue building, actually 5 synagogue buildings that were built by the Jews who came later from Central Europe and Russia. Maybe here after the bridge, we will be able to see a little bit of the Holocaust Memorial. After the bridge, if you look to the left, the Holocaust Memorial actually consists of 102,000 brick stones and the names engraved of all the Jewish people on the left-hand side. Here those mirrors now. And you see it behind it. Receive a proper burial, who were basically murdered by the Nazis. So 102,000 brick stones with the names engraved of those people. And above the monument are 4 Hebrew letters spelling the words "in memory of." So that's the Holocaust Memorial. Is anybody staying in Amsterdam after the cruise?
Yes.
So if you are interested in Jewish heritage and you find it in this area, there's also a Holocaust museum here. So very soon we will be joining the only natural waterway in Amsterdam, and that's the River Amstel. That's after the next drawbridge here. On the canals you mainly see fixed bridges, but here on the River Amstel we also have drawbridges, and to facilitate shipping traffic coming from the harbour and going to the River Amstel. And some of these ships are higher, and then the drawbridges can open up, and this is one here. So when you join the river, you look to the left, because in the distance you see the most photographed and the most famous drawbridge of Amsterdam. It's called the Skinny Bridge. It's called Skinny Bridge because it replaced an earlier bridge which was so narrow that only 2 people could pass on this bridge at the same time. You have time to take a good picture because we have to go slow. There's a little bit of a traffic jam here in front of us. There's people rowing even, look at that. And so they do practice rowing here on the River Amstel. You don't see them that often in town. Usually they are further upstream. Countryside, but today the decided to go to town. So this is a bit of the name Amsterdam has claimed. So the people here that built the dam, the River Amstel, called the settlement of Amstel in 1275, and I already mentioned. This year is the 750th anniversary of Amsterdam. Also a nice bridge, this is the Blue Bridge, which is in fact grey, as you can see. This also replaced an earlier bridge, a small wooden bridge which was blue. And so the old name stuck. And, this bridge is from the end of the 19th century, on the right hand side. So basically the part of the canal belt, so these 3 parallel canals that we just left behind us, that is the newest part, like I explained. It's actually from the 19th century. We're now entering here the part that's from the 18th century. And then in the end, finished at the end is the 17th century. It took them about 100 years to complete 2/3 of that canal belt. So we're actually traveling back in time. We're starting here again in the year 1700, and when we are at the end, we will be in the year 1613.
There's one of those little cars.
Where?
Right there, that little dinky one.
So you're going to see different houses here. We have about 50% of all the houses from the 16th, 17th and 18th centuries we still have, which is very unique, because in most European cities that's not the case anymore. Like cities like Paris and London, and they demolished all the old quarters, and in the 19th
Oh, look at that little red
they built
one.
wide boulevards,
That's even
along which they
smaller.
But here we didn't do that. We preserved rather than demolished. Was Amsterdam bombed during the war? That's a very good question. No, it wasn't. The Nazis, they
Skyler would
invaded in
love
May
that little
1940. And we were a strictly neutral country, we never took part in World War One, so we thought we could do the same thing again when World War Two started. But then the Nazis, they violated our neutrality and invaded, and the Dutch didn't want to surrender. And then the Nazis said, okay, if you don't surrender, then we are going to start bombing all your cities. And at first the Dutch didn't surrender, and therefore the Nazis, they bombed the city of Rotterdam. And so that was 4 days after the invasion, on the 14th of May, and they flattened Rotterdam completely. And there's only very little left now of the old part of Rotterdam. And therefore now a very modern city had to be completely rebuilt after the war. And Amsterdam was never bombed, because after the Rotterdam bombardment, they actually surrendered, the Dutch people, and then there was no more bombing, which was lucky, because look, we still have all this today. But this was the canal, and also the part of the canal where all the rich people settled. And you see a lot of uniformity in Amsterdam. You see a lot of houses that have the same width, like the standard width of a building block was a house that's 3 windows wide. My own house had to be built from brick or stone. But the rich people, they were not happy with a standard house, so they bought up 2 building plots and they built one house over the 2 building plots. Who went on the walk this afternoon? Did you also go to the Museum of the Canals?
Yes.
So that is a typical 17th century house,
Wow.
a canal house, so you already saw one. But here, on this stretch of the canals, there's quite a few as well. Look, there's one coming up here on the back, number 5 on the floor, and it's a very pretty double canal house. It has all the features of a double canal house of the 17th century. Has a double staircase leading to the door on the above the street level, and below this door used to be the servants' quarters and the kitchen,
Oh, yeah.
also in the basement.
We walked
And then
along
behind the
there.
door were the ballroom, dining room, the reception room, and upstairs the bedrooms, and then the highest rooms were where the servants used to live. And here on the left hand side, all these canal homes, they now make up the Waldorf Astoria Hotel. So it's actually a collection of double canal homes. They're all interlinked. See
Whoa.
number 548 we just passed, that is the entrance.
It's that electric Porsche.
Now very soon we will be
Ooh, there's
on this
another
bridge
little
here in
car.
front of us. And if you look to the left, there's an interlinking canal that links the 3 main canals, and we can look all the way down this canal from here. Well, I must say, providing there's no boat in this canal. And if there's no boat, then you will be able to see 7 bridges in a row from here. And so coming up soon on the left. And we have many bridges here, about 1,300, spanning 160 canals. And we have 160 separate canals in Amsterdam.
Hey, that's pretty cool.
Altogether 62 miles and 100 kilometers.
Kabunk.
Right on the left. Let's see if there's no boat here. That would be great.
That's purple.
You can see some boats passing, but you can see all the way
black
to
or
the Atlantic.
Whoa. Oh, they're pros.
Well, I mean, there's so much traffic.
Yeah, these boats have all kinds of
So,
maneuverability.
as far as the double canal homes are concerned, not a lot of people live in the double canal house today. Most of them are businesses like banks, insurance companies,
That's what
lawyers'
we found out
offices,
yesterday.
museums. There is, however, one person who still lives in a double canal house. It's coming up here on the left-hand side, a bit further down, and that's the mayor of Amsterdam. So this house is a little bit like the White House in Washington. If you become the mayor, then you get to live in this house, and if you are no longer the mayor, you have to move out. And yes, the mayor is a lady, first female mayor in Amsterdam history. And she's just done 6 years, and she's just signed up for another 6 years. She also has a house, it's her own house. She bought, but if you become the mayor, you get to live in this house. So it's the one here on the left with the little balcony on the first floor, and number 502. Also look up, because here there are 4 identical neck gables, gables in front of the roof, shaped like the neck and shoulders of a bottle, and they have the statues of the sea gods, and maybe you can see it better through the trees, if you look up. In Amsterdam you must always look up, because people, they try to decorate their gables nicely, to make their house stand out. Oh, there's people standing by her door. Now I want to know if she's standing by the door.
Whoa. The government built. How do you do that?
It's in the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah, if you're
It's
told
about
please
immigration.
watch your head,
Yeah,
because
stop
there's a very low bridge coming up.
They do have an issue. I mean, it's
Don't want to
really a
bump your
mess.
head.
Yeah.
Oh,
So I
I'm
just
so out
mentioned
of
how
it.
many canals we have. We have many, 160 altogether. 3 reasons why we needed canals: for drainage, to get rid of the excess water, because we always have flooding problems over here. Not anymore today, but in the
It
past.
is.
Also for transportation, to transport goods into the town from the harbour, to be stored in warehouses here, and also for protection. And there was always an outer mold around Amsterdam to make sure the enemies would not march through here. And also by this mold was a wall with bastions and barracks, because if the town's frozen,
These must be party boats.
to protect the city, it became useless because the enemy would be able to retreat across the canals. There is another very nice double canal house coming up on the right hand side. You see some brick homes, and then in between them there's a house that has been built from natural stone. And you also see the double staircase, and also look up, because that also has a very nice gable. See this one here on the right hand side, look up
This is similar
for
to
the
your
gable.
Yes, this is, yeah.
And a typical house of rich people of the 17th century. And so if you had your house built from brick, it was very cheap, because we could produce a lot of brick cheaply from or river clay. Yeah? We have a lot of rivers flowing into this country. If you built your house from natural stone, it meant you were very wealthy, because it had to be imported from quarries in Belgium and Germany. And we still have an expression today. If a person is very wealthy today, we say, "Oh, they're stone rich." And all these houses backing onto each other on adjacent canals have got huge gardens at the back. And usually the double canal homes also had in the garden a coach house, a coach and the horses.
We walked right through here.
And so was it nice to live here in the 17th century if you were a trader with the East and the West Indies? You built your huge mansion? What do you think?
I think it would be nice. Oh,
So these people who lived here, they usually only lived here for the winter. In the summer, very long time, until 1987. And we started to have all the households here in 1934, and then it lasted until 1987 to connect all of them. Then we also have a lot of houseboats in Amsterdam, about 2,500. They were connected around 2010. And so now the canal water is fairly clean, much cleaner than it used to.
I wonder if any cars fall into it. Maybe not.
So let me tell you a little bit about how we built houses here in the first place, because that's quite remarkable. Here in Amsterdam we're in a swamp, and the soil over here is totally unsuitable for building homes. It's a mixture of very spongy peat and clay soil. And the first houses here in Amsterdam, they were built from wood. Wood was a very cheap and also a very light building material. And they built those wooden houses straight on top of the soil, no foundations.
Oh, it's
and
an
they would sink
interesting
into the
graphic.
soil, but they would be occasionally raised as they sank. And because of all the wooden buildings, we had a lot of fires in the city. So eventually wood became a forbidden building material around 1550. And from then on, all the houses had to be built from brick or stone. And so if you build wooden houses and they sink, and you can imagine what happens if you build brick and stone houses. They sink faster, so you have to make a foundation. Now under Amsterdam, there are two sand layers which were deposited in the ice ages. One is at 12 meters down below, which is about 36 feet, and the next one at 50 meters, about 150 feet. And when people had to build their houses of brick and stone, they drove wooden piles to this first sand layer, and built the houses on wooden foundations and tree trunks, so mainly brought from the Black Forest in Germany. And so they drove those wooden piles to the first sand layer, and if you look at the houses here, a house that's 3 windows wide, and it's an average width of a house or a building plot, starts on about 80 wooden piles. The larger the building, the more piles were required. And as long as those piles were submerged in groundwater and air couldn't get to them, they wouldn't rot. Here in Amsterdam, the water tables are always varied a little bit, so houses were unavoidable. And therefore you see a lot of houses that leak in Amsterdam. Which is a problem that can be fixed, but it's very expensive to fix. And when we fix it, we don't use wood anymore. Today we use concrete and steel. Concrete cannot rot, and it can also be driven deeper and to the second sand layer, and therefore we can also build taller buildings. And like we saw in the harbor, where you're docked. If you build in brick, all these houses have a wooden framework inside. If you build them taller than 5-6 floors, the building will crush and it will collapse. So it was not possible to build higher on the wooden foundations. Now, if you look at the gables of most houses, you see that they have a hoisting beam and a hook. And here on the right-hand side, you can see that hoisting beam and hook. And inside these buildings, there's a very narrow staircase. Amsterdam staircases are like the stairs here into the boat. And there are no elevators in any of these buildings, and most of them are apartments, and usually one apartment on each floor. And so if you have to move house in Amsterdam, larger items, they will not fit over the stairs. And so you have to hoist your furniture up. And you do it by attaching a pulley wheel and a rope to the hoisting beam and the hook, and you hoist your furniture up. Look here on the right, this house is also leaning back on the corner. On some of them you also see the year, and there's one 1656, and the further we travel down this canal, the earlier the houses, because we're going back in time basically. So what does it cost to live here? So an average Amsterdam apartment is one floor, which is about 50 square meters, 500 square feet. And for that you pay about €500,000. Sure. Are you all from the US or are you maybe all from here? It's about $600,000 for a very small place. If you go outside Amsterdam and you try to buy property there, you can probably buy something which is 3 times the size for much less money than what you pay in town. We have a housing crisis in this country, and it's the worst here in Amsterdam, so that drives the prices up. If you rent from a private landlord, rent can be anywhere 2,500 per month for a small place. If an apartment comes up for rent here in Amsterdam, 400 now, an average wage here is about 2,800 per month. That is after tax. A lot of people are on this kind of wage, and you can imagine that they can't afford $500,000 mortgage. Neither can they afford to rent privately sometimes because it's so expensive. So we also have subsidized housing, and on subsidized housing, about 1/3 of the apartments over here are owned by the government and are for subsidized housing. The maximum rent is €900, and that sounds very good, but the thing is that because of the high demand and the housing crisis, the waiting list is enormous. It is 18 years.
18 years.
Your first birthday
Jeez, that's why people are so pissed. Worldwide. Yeah.
Look here on the left-hand side is a very nice 17th century house. And this an orange brick house here on the left-hand side. That's one, actually, one, if not the most beautiful example of a household by very rich people of the 17th century. That's also, by the way, a museum.
They're putting cover over that.
And of course, if you were in the National Art Gallery this afternoon,
Yeah.
you saw the paintings of Rembrandt and all Dutch masters. And so, those paintings they used to hang in all the houses and were owned by the rich people at one time. Because when the rich people built their houses here, they invited a lot of furniture makers, silversmiths, and also a lot of painters to furnish and decorate their homes. And 17th century people, they were fond of paintings, and they had them all over the house, and not one painting on the wall, but a whole wall full of paintings. They even had them in the kitchen. And the most famous painter, the most successful painter of the 17th century was Rembrandt. There were about 200 different paintings in Amsterdam, so we had to produce something special to be popular, and Rembrandt was doing exactly that. Most painters, they kept to one subject. They either only painted portraits, or they only painted still lifes, or only landscapes. With Rembrandt, he could do everything. Although in Amsterdam, he actually concentrated on portraits painting. And there was no photography in those days. So those people here, they wanted something for future generations. And that's why they had portraits painted of
Look at that building.
how we park the cars. On most canals it's a system like here on the left, and there's a steel bar running across in most places, and this was put in the 1970s by the Council of Amsterdam and the insurance companies, and you can see why, because the cars they used to roll into the canal on a regular basis. Now here on the right hand side it's a little bit narrower, but look how they're parked over here. You have to be very careful here on the right when you get out of your car, so you don't end up in the water, especially if you're in the driver's seat. But Amsterdam is a very car and friendly city. It takes forever to get around the city in a car because there's a one-way system that you must follow, and also the speed limit is only 30 kilometers per hour in town. Also, parking is very expensive. It costs €7.5 per hour to park your car here if you have to pay for parking. And therefore, people use bikes. You've already noticed that today, I think. Now we have 850,000 people, but we have over 1 million bicycles in town. Most people, they own 2 bikes, because many bikes get stolen. About 200,000 per year get stolen. And therefore you also see that most bikes are very old. And they have two locks, one through the back wheel and then a chain to chain it up to a lamppost or a bridge. And you have to make sure in Amsterdam that your bike looks as unattractive as possible, otherwise people steal it. And stealing a bike is also not regarded as a crime, because if your bike is stolen and you go to the police station to report it, they will probably send you home and they'll tell you to go and steal somebody else's bike. You can't be bothered with anything like that. Now here on the right hand side you see, so far we've seen a lot of parts of the canal where there were trees. But when the canals were first dug and the houses were built alongside them and there were no trees, they were planted later. And here on the right hand side you see a stretch of the canal which is they've recently actually fixed the canal walls because they're all in a very bad state in Amsterdam and they have to fix them in many different places still. And here the trees are gone, but this is what it looked like when in the 17th century when people first started to live here. Also along this part we're going to see some of the oldest houses that are to be found here along this canal. They're from the end of the 16th century, 1580 and 1590. And so they're coming up very soon, a bit further down on the right hand side. And here we're also going to see some houseboats. Look, here on the right hand side this is a converted barge. On the left this is a custom built houseboat, looks a little bit like a floating bungalow. About 2,500 people in Amsterdam, they live on houseboats. Sorry, there's 2,500 houseboats and 6,000 people live on them.
I could live in
They
one
have
of
the same
those.
facilities as an apartment. They have electricity, gas, postal address, garbage service. They're connected to the storage system as well. So you will see quite a lot of those.
I thought they had the newer
On the right hand side we have these very old houses. First we have one that's called Noah's Ark, which is actually an old warehouse. And the second one is called the Fortune, and they're from 1580. And those are two very old warehouses. And so these were amongst the first houses that were built over here. And then you can see there's a tall one here that says 1753. And so not all these building plots were built over at the same time. And so, maybe there was a house here which has been demolished, and then the house from 1753 was built in its place. Now, if you're looking at those houseboats, you see people in the houseboats who are waving and smiling at you, but most likely tourists. Because the local people, they don't usually wave and smile at the tourist boats, because if we go too fast, then we make their boat rock, and they don't like this. But there's also speed limit because of that. Here on the canal, it's 6 kilometers per hour, 4 miles per hour. So basically we've now come to the end, or actually the beginning of the canal circle, because this is where they started digging in 1613. And we're going to make a right turn onto a canal that's called Brouwersgracht. A gracht in Dutch is a canal. And many streets in Amsterdam are called gracht because we have many canals. And Brouwersgracht refers to brewers. And this was the canal where all the breweries used to be. Because beer was very important in the 17th century. And people could not drink the water, it was not safe to drink. So what did we drink all day long? Beer. Exactly, yeah. The beer was not as strong as the beer that we have today, yeah? But in those days, even children drank beer. And it was very common for that to happen. And on this canal where they produced the beer, there were lots of breweries that had their beers. They couldn't even produce enough for Amsterdam because lots of beer was imported from the town of Haarlem, which is close to me, it's on the North Sea coast. And there were also about 150 breweries in that town exporting the beer to Amsterdam. Because for them, they were on a river which was very clean water, and it was easier for them to produce beer than here in Amsterdam with all the filthy canals. Here on the right hand side, there's two very nice old warehouses coming up. A warehouse you can always recognize in Amsterdam because it has a point gable. And see here, you see a higher and a lower one. One has white shutters and one red shutters. The shutters is also an indication it was a warehouse at one time. And because glass was only used on domestic homes, and was never used on warehouses because glass was too expensive. And so when they stored goods in there to keep them warm and dry, they just closed the shutters. And today these are all apartments, and the shutters are only there for decoration. So very soon we are going to turn left, and we are reaching the canal, which was the outer moat of medieval Amsterdam. And so imagine the medieval core, and around it a moat to protect the town. And then it was only in the 17th century that they dug those three canals. So this one coming up here, and then on the left we will be going through some locks as well. Although those locks are always open. You came from Basel in Switzerland, and so you passed through about 10 locks, I think, on the upper Rhine. But here the locks are always open because the water was always at the same level. And there used to be a sea north of Amsterdam, which is essentially on the right, is the north. And this sea no longer exists, so now we don't have tidal movement here anymore. And also no flooding. At least no flooding. Amsterdam is now connected to the North Sea via a canal which was dug in 1875. It's called the North Sea Canal. And this canal is 15 miles long, 25 kilometers. And at the end of this canal are the largest sea locks in the world. And they have actually overtaken the Panama Canal locks, slightly larger. And then 2 years ago in November, some of the locks there at the end of the canal, they failed to close. And so the water was flowing into the canal, and the water level in Amsterdam was rising rapidly. And then they closed these locks here on the left, just as an emergency precaution. And that had not happened for 20 years. Yeah, there's very little space for Captain Ray, as you can see. So maybe we should all bring him. Churches in Amsterdam, they're not in use as a church anymore, because 54% of the people, they say they have no religion. And other 46%, half of them are Protestants, half of them are Catholics, but not a lot of people go to church anymore. So a lot of churches have become redundant, like this one. They've been put to other uses. So this one is an event center for this hotel. We have churches that are libraries, exhibition centers. There's one that's a venue for pop concerts. Where you find the oldest canals, the oldest houses, and also the oldest profession in the world. You know what I mean? So the famous /infamous rat district of on our left-hand side, after the bridge, on the left and up here. This used to be the multi-story bicycle parking of Amsterdam. No multi-story car park and multi-story bicycle parking. And there was space for 5,000 bikes here, but you don't see any bikes now because it's no longer allowed to park your bike there anymore, because we have a new bicycle parking, and that's here ahead of us and under the water. And there's space for 7,000 bikes in front of the station, 5,000 behind the station, and it's now mandatory here in the station area to park your bike under the water. This structure is going to be taken down as well very soon. So very soon, after the next bridge, you will see on the right hand side escalators, and people are taking their bike down into the bicycle parking when they're coming up with their bike. There's quite a lot of complaints about this new bicycle parking, because the escalators are broken on a regular basis.
Sounds
Also,
familiar.
you have to pay after 24 hours. Yeah, you could always leave your bike, but without paying, now you have to pay. On the left-hand side is the railway station. The railway station is from 1889. It was built on this artificial island in the harbour, which now splits the harbour in two. And by building this station, they actually cut Amsterdam off from its historical harbour. But it was built in the days when we no longer sailed to the East and the West Indies. And Britain had taken over from us as the greatest seafaring nation in the world. And when the railways came to Amsterdam, they wanted to hook them up with the harbour activities. And that's why they built the station in this spot. But it's a very nice building.
Wow.
On the front you see two towers. One is a clock tower showing the time, and the other one is a wind direction indicator. Now you can see the wind direction, now it's southwest. Actually, the predominant wind direction in this country is usually southwest. And that was very important when we used to sail to the East and the West Indies. So the oldest part of Amsterdam is actually now here on the right-hand side. If you look to the right, you see a church tower. Here on the right, behind the buildings, and that is the Tower of Old Church, and that's the oldest church in town. And its beginnings go back to the 13th century.
Wow.
Also, right in the heart of this oldest medieval part of Amsterdam. Here on the right-hand side is another church. This is St. Nicholas Church, and St. Nicholas Church is the main Catholic church of Amsterdam, and it's also still a working church. This is from 1887. And Amsterdam was a Catholic town, became Protestant during the Reformation, but tolerated all other religions. And but for a long time, all the other religions, they were not allowed to worship in public. They had to worship in private. So in Amsterdam, we had a lot of hidden churches, and for other religions than Protestantism. And it was not until the end of the 19th century that the Catholics, for instance, they were allowed to build new churches again. And so we saw at the end of the 19th century a lot of new Catholic churches being built, and this is one of them. It has recently been raised to the rank of cathedral. A cathedral is a church which is also the seat of a bishop. Although we do not have a bishop here, and we share the bishop with the town of Haarlem. But they made this a cathedral as a little bit of a present for the 750th anniversary of Amsterdam. This tower is called the Tower of Tears, or the Weeping Tower. And this tower here, look, this brick tower on the right hand side. And why is it called the Tower of Tears, or the Weeping Tower? Because this is where, by tradition, all the ships used to leave from to go to the East and the West Indies. And this is where the sailors' wives used to stand, saying goodbye to their husbands. And they didn't know if they were ever going to see them back alive. So therefore they were all crying. And therefore the Tower of Tears, or the Weeping Tower. On the right hand side, another nice building. This building is from the beginning of the 1900s, and it has flags on top. This used to be the Maritime House, and the Maritime House was the place where all the shipping companies used to have their offices. Not anymore today, because this is now a 5-star hotel, and the flags on top are the flags of all the shipping companies that are still in Amsterdam today. Different flags. Here on the left, coming up, is a floating Chinese restaurant. It's called the Sea Palace. This is actually a smaller copy of a floating Chinese restaurant in Hong Kong, China, which no longer exists, by the way. It was called the Jumbo. Maybe you've heard of that one. It was 10 times the size, though, of this one. This is a smaller copy of that Jumbo.
Is the food good?
The food is very good. It's always booked out, this restaurant. You have to book days in advance to get a spot. Yeah, genuine Chinese food, this one. Not adapted for the Dutch people like you have in many Chinese restaurants here. But yeah, very good. Here on the right hand side, look, many more houseboats. All of these are houseboats, and these barges that don't go anywhere, all converted into houseboats, and also some custom-built houseboats.
That was like something we have.
So ahead of us we
Yeah,
see
it does. It looks
the building we saw earlier of the Maritime Museum and also the Museums of Science and Technology.
So you have sleep
And here on the left,
Seattle.
this was all built about 25 years ago.
Yeah.
Residential
That's awesome.
apartments. We have the library over here, the music academy, and on the corner is a huge office building. There's also partly the office of Booking.com. That was built about 5 years ago. It is all fairly new, and you can see taller buildings, but these all have been built on the concrete foundations of these buildings. But you see also, they are typical Amsterdam apartments. If you look back, you see how the balconies are in sort of a small alleyway, yeah? There's not a lot of light. And this is another thing in Amsterdam, we have very little outdoor space in our apartments, and sometimes a small balcony, sometimes no balcony at all. And so therefore we also have a lot of public parks, which are very important social gathering points here in the city. Turn left and back towards the harbour. So you're on your river cruise and you came from Basel in Switzerland. I see today we also have an ocean liner here on the left, you probably saw it. That's going to leave again soon, which is always a spectacular sight because it has to turn around and then it will make its way down into the North Sea through this North Sea Canal. And it's actually bigger than some of the buildings here in Amsterdam. So, you can probably see it sailing out. We have about 190 ocean liners who visit Amsterdam per year. But we have many more river cruises, about 4,000 river cruise arrivals and departures. Your ship has swapped to the side of the dock, which I thought should But before you get off in a moment, look around you, make sure that you have all your belongings and that nothing is slipped out of your pockets, and that you have your cell phones, because you get left behind. You don't want that to happen. And I would like to take this opportunity to say thank you to Captain Ray. And then we would like to wish you a pleasant last night on the ship, I think. And then for some of you, you're going home tomorrow. Have a safe trip home. And for those of you who are staying in Amsterdam, enjoy your city. And then hopefully we'll see you back again sometime in the future.
I know.
I was just thinking.
Oh, okay.
the ship you're on.
Look to the right, you see a tower there, the one furthest to the left on the other side of the water. That's a tourist attraction. It used to be an office of the oil company Shell, but now you can go up into this tower. To the top there's a viewing platform, very nice views of Amsterdam and the harbour, and also there are swings up there. Did you know this? Yeah, so you can swing over the edge of the building. They're swinging just now, so people swinging at 100 meters above the ground, at 300 feet above the ground. So we're gonna turn around and then dock. Please remain seated.